What's up again there, guys? Brian here at 3TR, here to bring you another solid episode of People's Questions. We got a pretty standard episode this time, like we always do for the most part. We'll jump right into them. The first question comes from Macho Whisker 17, and you want to know, do I think that either Kratos or his son will be the cause of Ragnarok in the new God of War game series? I think that's a little early to call, because we're not even sure what we're dealing with. We're not even sure if the gods are going to play a major factor in this new God of War series. So I think it's a little bit early to make that kind of call, because I would have figured. Funny thing about God of War is that if you actually played the second one, there was actually like a bunch of pictures that are placed in a specific hallway right before the final boss that kind of show you. They pretty much give you a hint of what the following game was going to be about. And I kind of figured that this would not, that if God of War were to end and lead on to like another series, it would not have gone into the Viking era. I figured it would have been the rise of Jesus Christ, because there's even a picture in God of War 2 that specifically kind of hints that that's where they were going. So I'm a little bit surprised that they went this route. So I think it's just a little bit too early to bring Ragnarok into the equation. Next question comes from Santiago Scarpino, and you have a pretty confusing question. So I gotta pause, think, and say this very, very slowly, because even I don't quite understand this one. But you want to know, do I think an anime dub with good voice acting but terrible translation would be a good or bad dub? Well, I think it really comes down to the performances. As long as your performances are good and you pretty much get the point of what the characters are trying to project, then I don't really think a translation is all that bad. I mean, as long as I understand what the characters are saying. Next question comes from Matt Cruz. He wants to know, who is my favorite Dragon Ball Z villain? I guess Vegeta, kind of, but he's someone who started out as a villain and kind of became an anti-hero. But there was a point where he was a legitimate villain, so I would probably say Vegeta during the Saiyan saga, so yeah, I'll go for Vegeta. Next question comes from Zyborg136. He wants to know, do I think the developers should have a choice when making a game to delay it despite the publishers pushing for a deadline, or overhaul rushing developers to force them to release an unfinished game just for the sake of profit and publicity? I think that developers should definitely have a say in terms of when we should release the game. Because as we saw with Mass Effect, that game was clearly not polished by the time it was released, because it was plagued with bugs. One of the biggest issues. It was universal. It wasn't just one copy or a little glitch here and there. It was plagued. I would have been perfectly fine if they had said, look, we're having some technical issues. We would like to push the game back a month or two just to clean it out, just to polish it a little bit. I would have been perfectly fine. I don't quite understand why they feel they need to get the game out when they do if they know it's not ready. I think give me take as much time as you need. I want to pay top dollar for a true AAA title and not have all these issues, because then that just kind of gives me the idea that you guys don't know what the hell you're doing when I know what you're doing, because you're a very talented publisher and developer. So I would have been happier if the developers had waited, cleaned it up, and then release it. Release it in its best shape. Don't release it due to some deadline. The same with movies. I mean, heck, movies get pushed back all the time for reshoots, or you need to make some quick changes, and sometimes that makes a movie even better. So I think that the gaming industry should take note of that. Next question comes from Abil, and you want to know, in my opinion, what were the most controversial verdicts that made... Wait a second, hang on. I gotta rephrase this. In my opinion, what were the most controversial verdicts that I've made in my Versus series? Okay, so you want to know which matchup do I think was most controversial? I think the most controversial matchup that I ever did, it's kind of a mix-up between either my Nemesis versus Ustanak video or Titus versus Cloud? Ustinak versus Nemesis, I think I stand by that decision more, because when you really look at how the Ustinak was created, it makes perfect sense that the Ustinak would be better, because even the creators of the Ustinak admitted that all they did was take the blueprints of Nemesis and build on top of that. So you could say that the Ustinak is just Nemesis 2.0. This is a superior version. They simply looked at Nemesis, took all its strengths, removed all its weaknesses, and made a much more dangerous creature. So obviously the Ustinak would win. With Cloud and Titus, I think it's just the fact that Cloud has such a big fan base that they cannot... It's hard for them to accept the idea that a wussy boy crybaby like Titus could take Cloud out. But when you really look at his skill sets and what his strengths are compared to how Cloud was during 7, I think I did a solid job at explaining why it makes sense that Titus could take down Cloud. Now, this is definitely something I will be bringing up again in a future matchup coming up soon, but I stand by that decision too, because Cloud during that time was really not the combatant that he should have been. He's not nearly as formidable as someone like Zack would be, which I did a Zack versus Titus matchup, and the difference between them is that Zack was a much more properly trained combatant than Cloud. All Cloud did was really copy Zack's style, and he did somewhat of a poor job at that, and he had a very small amount of time to do that. Zack had years and years to build up his skill set through countless hours of combat experience. Really, when you see Cloud at the beginning of Final Fantasy VII, when he comes off that train, that is the first time he has actually used that sword in combat. And so even at that point, before going to that battle, he didn't know if this was going to work because he'd never used the sword in combat before. So it was a bit of a surprise for him that it was so successful, even though it was like a poor addition. It was a poor rendition of Zack's fighting style. It was still effective because he was fighting such weak soldiers. And even moving forward, when you go to even stronger bosses, Cloud is not really as good as people would think he is because he's fighting with allies. They make up for what he is lacking. Zack would not have this issue. Zack could probably take on all the bosses throughout the game by himself because he has the training. Cloud does not. I don't want to continue on, but that's just a quick explanation of my thoughts on those controversial matchups I made. But I do stand by those decisions. The next question comes from Goku-san. You want to know, how do I think Mass Effect timeline would turn out if Shepard was informed about the Arcs heading into Andromeda and decides to go with them after he gets resurrected, or at least after he beats the Collectors to deal with the Arrival? Number one, Shepard ain't leaving the Milky Way if he knows the Reapers are coming. So he's not going to leave. He's not going to be a whiny little pussy and just get up and leave. And no one's going to let him do that. So the concept of him wanting to go and join the Andromeda Initiative is insane. But if he did, what would he do? What purpose could he possibly serve? The whole point of the Andromeda Initiative is to establish colonies. Shepard is a soldier, so his skills at negotiation and stuff like that really wouldn't be very useful. That's kind of the job of Pathfinders, and I don't really think Shepard has the, let's just say, the resignation to be a Pathfinder. I certainly wouldn't, he certainly wouldn't get my vote in terms of being a Pathfinder. He wouldn't get my vote, so I think that Shepard would be best staying in the Milky Way fighting off the Reapers, because I think that Shepard is so important to fighting off the Reapers that if he were to leave, you have no one to lead the galaxy against the Reapers, and obviously the Reapers would have won. The next question comes from Joe Okola. You want to know, so you were wondering if I'm familiar with the Xenosaga game series, and more specifically their combat android Chaos-Mos, or K-O-S-M-O-S. No, I've never played the Xenoverse games, and I don't know who that is. Next question comes from Shiny Mega Gengar. You want to know, will Kratos ever appear in a Versus Series matchup? I don't want to say that he'll never show up, but it's very unlikely. I'm not sure who I would put him up against. He's kind of unique and in a class by himself, so maybe if I came up with a good enough opponent, but as it stands right now, it is very, very unlikely that he will show up in a matchup. Next question comes from JBat. You want to know, am I going to watch Teen Titans: The Judas Contract? I've already seen it. I thought it was okay for the most part. Nothing too special. I would say that DC's animated department is pretty mellow at the moment, but it was worth a good watch. I don't think I'd see it again, but I thought it was okay. And the last question of the episode comes from JDS4696. He wants to know, do I think that Star Wars: The Last Jedi has the potential to be better than Star Wars: The Force Awakens? No. I think this could be worse, but I'm not planning on watching The Last Jedi. I said this on social media, both my Twitter and Facebook. I'm on the fence of whether I want to do a video going into depth as for why I will not be seeing The Force Awakens, or why I don't want to see the Last Jedi. But this could potentially be even worse. This could do so much damage. Here's my issue with the Star Wars movie fan base. You see another Star Wars movie, and you get excited. But I think anyone that really does some serious homework or pays attention to exactly what this story is going to be about could realize just how much catastrophic damage this thing can do. Especially with our knowledge of the Force. People like to complain about midichlorians and the Phantom Menace, when really the whole midichlorians thing, people say, oh, there's a scientific explanation for the Force. It's not really scientifical, it's logical. All Qui-Gon is explaining is why some people can use the Force and why others can't. That's all he said. It's not a scientific explanation. But what they're planning on doing is so radical, it would be the equivalent of, like, if someone were to say that Jesus Christ was not really the Son of God, and I have the evidence to prove that. I mean, could you imagine the catastrophic damage that would happen to the Christian religion if they found out that their Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, was not really the Son of God, and he was just some crazy yuppie who was told that he was the Son of God his whole life, to the point where he told himself and he believed it, and he convinced all these people to believe in him when he wasn't. I mean, that is the kind of damage that this movie can do, and I want no part of it. It could be so terrible. I'm about 80% sure what is about to happen, and it is so horrible that if I were to see this movie, I won't even be able to watch the older films, because I don't want to watch those movies with this new information in my mind. It's going to make it just harder to watch. It's going to be harder to accept knowing what's going to happen. I mean, it's kind of like watching the prequels first and then watching the originals. The biggest twist in the originals is the whole Darth Vader is Anakin Skywalker. But if you watch the prequels first, then it's not really a shocker because you know that. You saw the transition. That's why it's like, do I really want to watch this movie and then watch the originals knowing that what's about to happen coming up is pretty much cancels out everything I've seen before? I don't want to risk that. So, as it stands right now, and it probably will stand until the test of time, I have no plans on ever seeing this film under any condition. I want no part of this sequel trilogy. I'm gonna check out the anthology films. I'm interested in Han Solo, and I'm still waiting for my Obi-Wan Kenobi movie announcement, and possibly a Boba Fett movie down the road. But as it stands right now, after seeing The Force Awakens and how shitty that movie was, that was by far the worst movie I saw in 2015, and possibly would fit into the category of being in the top 10 worst films I've ever seen in my life in terms of worst theater experiences of all time. I don't want to see The Last Jedi. I have no plans on seeing it, and I would really appreciate that when you guys do see it, don't talk to me about it, because I don't want to know anything about this film, period. And with that, those are all the questions you guys sent in for this episode. I'd like to thank you guys for making this episode possible. If you guys have any more questions you'd like to answer in next week's episode, be sure to type them in the comments down below, and make sure you get them into me before next Wednesday before I start filming this. And like always, thank you guys for watching. You're awesome, and I will see you next time.